All right. Elena Barbera. Okay, we are finally together here after many tech issues. We have made it work. I'm so excited that you are my first guest on the Unschooling the Mind podcast. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm psyched to be your first guest.
Yeah, I know. It's so good. And you know what? The first when I started this podcast, I thought, should I even have guests? I'm just going to do short riffs because busy parents don't have time to listen anyway. I thought 35 minutes was pretty short. And then I was like, I might even bring it down to 10. And then I was like, you know what, though? As you know, behind the scenes, so many of us are connecting that it's
Yes.
impossible to not want to bring each other on and corroborate the evidence and discuss and connect and have other people follow your work and bring things together. So once I saw the documentary that you put out, which is amazing, American Groomer, and we'll have that in the show notes, I was like, oh my gosh, this mama knows what's up. And not only that, you put together in the 37-minute visual, amazing presentation what I tried to do with Jason Christoph in 3 hours, on
Mm.
sheets and stuff, and so it was amazing. So let's just get right into it. So I
Awesome.
wanted to first ask you, what was the pivotal moment for you that made you become such a badass mama and decide that you were going to stand in the gap for our kids?
Okay, well, I can tell you, sitting at the kitchen table, screaming for the past few years, watching attacks on free speech, our gun rights in America, our immigration, watching our cities burn down, being told that we're racists, and I could go on, right? And
Hmm.
and it became really frustrating to watch that nobody was standing up for anything.
Hmm.
And then, my son invited me on his YouTube channel, and in some of that content, I really started to find out a lot about the transgender movement
Hmm.
that really appears to be a social contagion with kids. And I started digging deeper into that and realizing that this was really about sexualization of kids, because and then I start hearing about book bans. And so this particular issue as a mother just really started to get to me. And I really wanted to know more.
Hmm.
And so I hear, all this controversy around book bans, and I'm seeing, but, people are getting kicked out of school board meetings for reading from these books because they're too vulgar. But the mainstream media is telling me there's nothing wrong with these books. So it's okay. Kids need these books. They're important. So I bought the books. Like, all right, let me just, I'm getting all this conflicting information. I believe nothing else I see on the news anymore about other issues until I do my own homework. So I bought the books. And when I tell you the things that I read in some of these books, like Genderqueer and Let's Talk About It and Flamer, were so vulgar and such extreme adult content to the point of we're talking violent S&M,
Hmm.
that I realized people need to wake up. And so this summer, I'm sitting at the kitchen table at my mom's house, got a bunch of family over for dinner, and it comes up. And somebody in my family who's very well educated, has worked in the legal system with children for her entire career, didn't believe me when I was telling her there was pornography being pushed in schools. And it's lies, what you're hearing on the mainstream media. And, she said, I consider myself to be a well-informed person, and this just is not true. And somebody on the other side of the table started going, "Oh, actually, it is true." And he starts pulling up links of news stories of parents getting kicked out of school board meetings and what's going on. And it got tense. Some people walked away from the table. And that was when I said, I have to do something about this. I have to let people know that they're being lied to, that they have trust. I've learned that, they have trust in their librarians and trust in their teachers and trust in the school system. That it has been shattered. That is not valid anymore. That maybe there was a time when we could trust all those institutions, but we just can't anymore.
100%. So I reached out to my Instagram channel and said, if you have any questions, I'm meeting with Elena at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. tonight. And one of the big questions was, what is your response to this will never happen in my child's school? So I mean, you just kind of answered that you've got that rhetoric as well. And what's really interesting is up here in Canada during the Million March for Children, there was a teacher that spoke out. I put it on my page. And she basically was apologizing in tears and saying, I am sorry, that is my profession that is going to indoctrinate your kids. And she said the reason that people are struggling to understand what's going on is because they look down the hallway and they look in their classroom and they don't see it in this classroom and they don't see it in that classroom. And so when you go deeper in the agenda, you understand how insidious it is that it's not an actual subject, that there's no panel of people that are choosing these books, that it's up to the discretion of the librarian, of the sex activists they hired to lead the LGBTQ gay groups after school, or that one teacher who's really wanting to push this, or it's perhaps a principal, or maybe it's Planned Parenthood dropping in the sex A to Z cards like they did accidentally in Saskatchewan and BC here last summer. So,
Wow.
what do you say, and how do you handle that? And it's funny because that's what you're saying was the thing that made you go, I got to do something about this.
So I'm still hearing that. Oh yeah, I heard, I'm putting out a lot of content shorts on Twitter and on Instagram and TikTok, and I'm still getting comments that say, "Oh yeah, I've heard about this, but it doesn't happen here." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Listen, call the school, call your school district or your child's school, and ask them for a list of library books. You're gonna have to fight for that." So you have no idea what is in there. And parents don't know until they know. And I tell them, every single parent that you see getting kicked out of a school board meeting for reading from these books, they also thought it wasn't in their school until it was put under their nose and they saw it and they heard about it from their kid. So we have to be proactive. Do not believe that, don't even for a second believe that you're exempt from this. So here in the States, 39 states have what are called obscenity exemption statutes that make it so it's a crime to show pornography to a child if you show it to them in the mall or the park or anywhere. But if you cross the threshold of a school or a library, you can show it to them there and you will be exempt from criminal prosecution.
Mhm.
And so that up until a couple of years ago, that was 44 states, and 5 states have repealed the exemptions. So I asked them, I say, "What state are you in?" And even if they say New Jersey, I say, "Well, New Jersey doesn't have them. New Jersey is in legally a safe state, but I can show you where in New Jersey schools these books have been found in the school libraries." And because it doesn't matter, because they're pushing them under this umbrella of inclusion and fairness to trans kids and gay kids. And, it raises the other question of, why are we talking about who children are sexually attracted to? It's just this avalanche of, questions that come at you when you really start thinking about what's going on. So I show them specific examples from their own states of where it's happening and explain to them that everyone thought it wasn't them.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up New Jersey because here I am, this little mom up in Canada that's getting censored as well. And I was doing some research for one of my presentations and found out that I found an article that it said in New Jersey that there's been a 4,000% increase in kids who declare themselves non-binary. And it's interesting because one day in my email list, so I have, thousands of people on my email list. And one day it popped into my box. Like I don't see who signs up for my email list, but somehow this one day I did. And lo and behold, it was the NGEA, like the New Jersey Education, like diversity group. And I'm like, they're creeping on my website and wanting to get on to see what I am saying. Isn't that wild? And I caught
Wow.
it. I caught it and I deleted them, but I just thought, man, this is next level.
Right, because they need to know how to form arguments against people like you. Look at Gays Against Groomers. So this is an organization of lesbians, gays, bisexual people, and some trans people who are saying, lay off the kids. And they're active in almost every state, and they have had a role in all 19 states that have recently banned trans surgeries. But the Southern Poverty Law Center has labeled them an extremist group.
Mm.
The Trevor Project has called them a hate group, an anti-LGBTQ hate group. I mean, the absurdity of it. So what they're trying to do is creep on you, and then they can, put you on their watch list of bad people. I'm sure,
100%.
I haven't heard if I'm on a watch list yet, but it's
I'm
inevitable
sure
that
you
it's
are, but you
coming.
know what?
Yeah.
We're in good company. I
Yeah.
definitely know most of my friends from going to the trucker convoy are on that list. I mean, we have our government up here who's paid $850,000 a year for an anti-hate.ca network where his cronies that he hires with our taxpayer dollars actually have a list and profiles of people who are actually just out speaking the truth and bringing voice to, and concern to the communism that's creeping up here. I shouldn't even say creeping up. We're in a we've been seized up here in Canada, let's be honest. And most of those people I know. So I'm not even sure. I should be on a list. If I'm not, I will be soon. And we'll be together and in good company. So, that's just how I've kind
Well,
of chalked it up. And I have interviewed Maggie, and she's also, I think she's the
yes.
chapter leader in New York now.
Yes.
And we came together for the Million March, and so when anyone calls you, and this is for the audience as well, a bigot, a transphobe, I mean, you're going to hear climate denier. It's going to go on and on. Just know that you are on target. You are on target, speaking common sense, and that what they are saying is an actual program. It's a program. These people are programmed, right? And they are just spewing rhetoric, like absolute nonsense, that parents would be concerned about the content in their children's textbooks or libraries. To bring that up for the viewers, if you go to exposingsoji123.com, and I'll have that in the show notes, in Canada, there is a dad who's put together chronologically across the nation all of the books that are in the library. So you can look up the school, you can look up the library, and through other parents, concerned parents who have gone in, taken the books, he has categorized this, and you can see where it is in your school. But
Awesome.
I was listening to your documentary, and one of the interesting things they talked about was the teachers union. So up here in Canada, there was a leaked Zoom call when the Million March was going on of the union leaders coming together and encouraging their employees and to go protest against these parents who, in their eyes, were hate. There's no place for hate, is what their thing is, right? These
Yep.
parents who are coming together, Sikhs, Muslim, Jews, everyone. Interesting that the manufactured, war out east, like, squashed that union. It seems like whenever we come together united about the kids, something catastrophic happens. So tell me in the States, because in the documentary talked a little bit about the power of the teachers union. Like, who's funding this, in your opinion? What's going on with them?
I can't say for sure, but we hear that it's, Soros funded and all the things that are destroying us. But I don't know if that's just hearsay at this point, because I am not an investigative journalist. I put this film together because I wanted to help my country and I wanted to help the children. But I had to study and really do deep research and learn how to interview people and learn how to write a documentary. And I did it, but with what skills I had, but I'm not skilled to say, follow the money and find out really where who is funding this and why. But I do know that they get a lot of free books from places like the Human Rights Campaign, which has lists and lists of books that talk about gender identity starting in pre-K.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go on their websites and find their resources for schools, and it'll teach you how to talk to a 3-year-old about being in the wrong body
Mm-hmm.
or being non-binary.
Mm-hmm.
The teachers unions here in the States have tremendous political power, and they give a lot of money to political candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So they also have that power behind them. I can't for the life of me figure out why, when we have a failing education system here in the US, the teachers unions have any voice at all, because obviously you're failing our children
Mm-hmm.
when
100%.
less than half of them are reading and doing math at grade level when they graduate high school. They're just being pushed through, handed diplomas. They can barely read. And this is the workforce and the citizens that you're creating. But what I really worry about with the teachers unions are the teachers themselves. So any teacher, that's been there for a while, I'd say the majority of teachers are well-intentioned and they want to teach kids. And all the ones that I talk to, and I'm middle-aged, so I'm talking to older teachers. And all of them just say, anytime this stuff comes down the pipeline, they do what they can to just kick it to the side and try to ignore it. They don't want to talk to their kids about gender identity and sex, like sexual preference, kink. Why have we even heard one story of a teacher bringing sex toys into a classroom to discuss with children about pleasure? I mean, we're dealing with such a crazy thing that we have to fight for the innocence of children. That was something that we always agreed on as
Mhm.
human beings.
Mhm.
And now we're told that children are sexual from birth and we should be honoring that. And when, people like us just aren't having it. But I feel sorry for the teachers because they're so pressured. Teacher that's been teaching for 20, 25 years, she's ready to retire. She's got her pension that she's been working on for decades, and she just wants to retire in a few years, and it's being held over her head. Either you follow the rules and you go and you hang that rainbow flag, or you're going to be outcast if you speak up. And I think that what we need here is more parents to speak up, but we also need people of power to speak up and say to the teachers, we're going to have your back and we're going to fight for you to make sure you don't lose everything when you stand up and say this is wrong.
Well, this is all just like the Schmovid Con 2.0, right? And I feel like it's calling on each one of us to hear the calling of speaking up when it matters the most and we have the most to lose. Like this is like a collective human experience that we are going through. People that have in the last 4 years just kind of glided by and aren't getting involved in anything, they're going to have their opportunity, I believe, especially this year in 2024. Like literally with the doctors, it's the same thing. Teachers, it's the same thing. Teachers are supposed to be beacons of light and knowledge for our children. And I'm sorry, but during COVID, they dropped the boat. If they thought that they were doing a great job, I'm sure some of them were trying their best. And I've actually interviewed some who've left and taken their kids now out of the system and talked about how horrific it was and how the teachers spoke about the parents who didn't comply necessarily. And so it's the same thing with the doctors, they're not speaking up because why? Because they might lose their jobs, because they might this and that. Like the entire matrix structure is all about this power and authoritarian control, and it's got a hook into everything. And I think it's really hard for people to wrap their heads around this. Are 98% of the people good-natured people? Yes, but they're also programmed. They're programmed, and that is the most dangerous person, somebody that cannot see the just follow orders. Well, I'm doing it because I was told to. I'm just going to push that flag. I better put these things. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to keep quiet. I mean, the Holocaust happened. When I brought that up in 2020, I had so many people, and I'm Jewish, and the Jews were mad at me when I said, like, this is how the Holocaust happened when good people stood by idly and let things pass, right?
Why is that a controversial thing to say? Because that we've been saying, I heard that my entire life. When I first learned about the Holocaust as a little girl, it was because good people stood around and let it happen. Because I remember as a kid saying, but how could that happen? How did
Mhm.
people, like, it's the first thing you say is, how come nobody stood up for them?
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
absolutely right.
I don't know, and I don't know, it's such a triggering thing, and not all there are many awake Jewish people. I'm not gonna say that. In my circle, there was only a few at the time. I think there's more now, but, definitely it's like, you're not allowed to bring that up. And even people that are Jewish, they don't want you to bring up George Soros, because that might be anti-Semitic. Well, I'm sorry. I don't care. Evil lurks in all forms, genders, and races, like, and religion. So let's get it straight, people. This is about humanity versus evil, the good people of the world versus the elites. And that's how I see it. And that's not going to change. But getting back to what you were talking about investigative reporting, that's one of the reasons I think people are kept in the dark. The people perish for a lack of knowledge. And obviously with censorship, which equals communism and death, in my opinion, which is happening to you, it's happening to me, these two moms just out of nowhere. Imagine how it's happening to bigger voices and politicians. And then you start to question like the people that have huge accounts that are politicians, like, how come they get to speak? We kind of are saying the same thing. I mean, this whole idea of controlled opposition, no, I don't believe it's everybody, but there really is like something to this matrix of what's allowed to be seen. And so when people don't know right? Like you said, oh, I'm not an investigative journalist, but I've seen this and I've seen that. It's great for us to say what we have physically seen and who we've spoken to. But the big thing that's between our countries, what I have noticed, and I know you spoke about this in your documentary, was Alfred Kinsey
Hmm.
and John Money, who is the mad scientist, we'll call him, that coined gender ideology in the first place and was actually a creeper with the Reimer twins. Y'all can look that up or go to one of my presentations. And up here in Canada, we have Ben Levin, who was the deputy minister for Kathleen Wynne, the premier of our biggest province, who pushed through and tabled the SOGI curriculum, which is equivalent to your, in the States, sexual comprehension guide done
Okay.
pushed by UNESCO and the UN. So it basically, underlying all of this, so people understand, is the fact that children are sexual from birth. And that right there is the problem, because to understand what's going on, we have to look back historically and take a bit of a bird's eye view. So basically, that notion, which was pushed by Alfred Kinsey back in the 40s, right, through predatory self-serving data of pedophiles, and most likely
Correct.
himself. And people say, well, he might have just been watching. We're not sure. Well, let me tell you, if you guys look into it deep enough, you'll see that he actually went to Aleister Crowley's place when he died to go find his books and, had this thing for him. Like, you guys, we got to get to the point where there's smoke, there's fire. We have to start really calling stuff out,
As
right?
if it's okay to watch abuse and stand there and take notes. Like
And
that's
pay
that.
them,
Yeah,
pay them.
that's the same as participating. But anyway,
So what
people will
did
say
you find
anything.
out? And what did you find out about did you, were you aware of Alfred Kinsey and his work being the basis for your current comprehensive sexual curriculum right now in the United States?
No, I had heard of him through What is a Woman? And then once I went to Washington to interview Terry Schilling from the American Principles Project, and they're a family values lobbying group in Washington. And, they're doing a lot of work out there. And he was the one who told me about the obscenity exemption statutes. And when I went to talk to Mary McAllister at the Child and Parental Rights Campaign, who they're a legal group that are working with, to help parents fight for their children against this gender ideology in the schools, she was the one who can help me connect the dots between Kinsey and and the education. And Kinsey was funded by the Rockefellers,
Mhm.
and his initial institute was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And then they put together, after he did all this research and published his books on the human sexuality and sexuality in the human female and one in the human male, they then formed a legal guild to create these obscenity exemption statutes. So they created a model penal law, and then they went around the country and in 44 states managed to pass these exemptions. And it was directly linked to Kinsey. And then I realized that one of his disciples was the founder of SICUS, which is the Sexual Information and Education Council of the United States, one of the largest and most influential sex ed organizations in the states that have influence in all schools in all 50 states. And so all of it just leads back to Kinsey. And, he was a pervert who abused children. And the fact that none of these people turned around and said, what this man has done is criminal and bizarre is just beyond me. And how they managed to convince 44 states to make it okay to show pornography to children, and how they convinced 50 states to put inappropriate and misleading information into schools. So it's not just about children are, from the children are sexual from birth. You have this whole sex positivity movement. You can sleep with whoever you want. It's good for you. You're free. You have the right to do it. But they don't really teach kids valuable facts about STDs. They kind of treat STDs as a no biggie. It's not that big of a deal. Don't worry, you can take a pill. But meanwhile, Big Pharma is raking in billions of dollars every year on young people's STDs. And they're completely disregarding the fact that it is traumatic to catch an STD, regardless of how many times somebody tells you it's nothing. When you can't sit, stand, or walk because it hurts so bad, you're going to feel differently about it. It just goes on and on.
Yeah, and the trans agenda, all of this is a pharmaceutical political agenda, period. And it's turned into a social
Mhm.
contagion with the big push of a small minority of people. And if people want to go and look up people like Jennifer Prichter, who used to be a man, George Soros's Open Society, you can easily link a lot of this funding to these organizations, even the NGA that we talked about earlier in New Jersey. And it's not that far to see a couple arms lengths that it's the same group of people. And a lot of them are these transgender billionaire guys, these men that have fetishes and want to dress up as women and are pumping millions of dollars into our universities and other NGOs to push forward this agenda, because I believe, and with enough research, you can find yourself that this is leading us to a transhumanist takeover. This is what they want. They want to merge machine with human. And in order to do that, they have to break down genders. They have to break down culture. They have to make the erasure of womanhood, because we are the givers of life and birth. And that is much too godly. And what this is an AI takeover on some sort by these psychopaths. And interesting, when you talk about Kinsey, how did everybody just let this happen? Well, that's what I say: selected and protected. And he was selected and protected like everyone else. Like, how did this other guy in Canada, Ben, he went to jail, Ben Levin, for 3 years for admitting for child pornography, for producing child pornography. This is the education minister for the Kathleen Wynne, who pushed this curriculum into
Wow.
Canada that's now rampant everywhere. He admitted to sexually assaulting all three of his daughters and fantasizing about having sex with his grandkids, who were babies at the time. How did this guy? How come his bank accounts weren't frozen? I just want to know, because the truckers, they could
The
do that. Like,
truckers.
why
Yeah.
why was his bank account frozen? He got less than 3 years. And there were people and psychologists on record that said that this Soji curriculum, and were protesting against him and saying that this is predatory grooming material. And now what started as a pilot project in one little town, in one little city, has turned rampant through the entire nation, because it is being well funded. And you see these parents going to school boards, just like in the States. They can't get an answer. They're told that they're, racist and they're bigots and they're a threat to the community and they won't be, right? It's the same playbook.
It absolutely is. And it's funny because, to go back to what you said earlier about how come some voices get to say conservative things. And the reason is because if you let enough people speak truth, just a little bit, then it seems like you're fair. And it seems
Mhm.
like, "Oh, yeah, everything is still
We have
okay. Look,
choice.
look, they let him talk, but I'm gonna silence most of these people because we don't want too many of them waking people up." Like I do, we can see that there's an actual effort to normalize pedophilia.
Mhm.
But, 20 years ago, they went, when the Catholic Church scandal broke, everybody went after them. Oh, the Catholic Church is bad. So that had a multi-pronged purpose. One, it makes it seem like we actually care about children. Don't you tell us we don't care about children. Look how we shun the Catholic Church. And it also shed a bad light on religion and church and God, which is extremely useful when you're trying to normalize pedophilia. And you start teaching young people. From when I was a child, even started with self-esteem, then it started with follow your dreams, and everything is about you and your feelings. And so, it puts us in the seat of idolatry. And then you start adding, oh, your physical pleasure is the most important thing. And
Mhm.
that's where we're at, where they're teaching
Mhm.
children that how they feel in their body, whether they're being sexual or not, how your mood indicates your gender. I mean, it just making up these wackadoo things. But when you take away God, you take away reason. It's easy to fill that void, because it has to be filled with something. But in the end, they can try to remove women and remove men, but as powerful as they think they are not going to win. You cannot undo human nature. You just can't
Mhm.
without continuing to poison our food and, our psyches and, so they will hurt some of us, but human nature, which was in my view created by God, is unbeatable. So
Mhm.
we're going to win this war on our children eventually and on our societies. We're going to win this war eventually. But it's going to get worse before it gets better because they're doing a really good job of infiltrating the minds of our society from children when they're young.
Agreed. I 100% agree that we will win this war. And I don't know if it's just something in my soul. It's just like something that I know, just like how I could see this scam coming and I woke up. I feel like there's a spiritual contract with those of us who are star seeds and we get our mission papers and we're supposed to be doing this work, right? It's almost like I woke up and I was like, oh, this is why I'm on this planet, right? So I too feel like we will win this war. And I do think it's going to get worse before it gets better because there's so many people that are complacent, wanting to stick their head in the sand. And we have been coached and programmed to believe that the devil doesn't exist. And I'm not saying a big guy with scary horns and stuff, but whatever you want to call this evil, this dark consciousness, whatever word suits you, it is what it is, and it is infiltrated into every system that has raised us. And I'm just going to say it how it is, and maybe I'll get wiped for this, but I just believe that there's a network of pedophiles that are elites and they run the world. And that's why all of these people have these like backgrounds and they've been able to stay. I mean, if you look at the Kinsey Institute, for example, they are still getting 850,000 US dollars a year, 450,000. It's 850,000 Canadian dollars for the anti-hate network, but 450,000 US dollars a year from the American government to keep their facility open. They
Yep.
have asked numerous times to have the documents of the people who are still living, if they're living at all now, that know that they were victims of his abuse, and they will not give them. And they actually have a plan. They actually have an exit plan if the FBI or anyone enters their facility on how to burn or get rid of the evidence of Kinsey's predatory self-serving data. And so right there, you have to say to yourself, why is this being protected? Like when you talked earlier about finding stuff where you could see what they're giving 3-year-olds or the young ones.
Mhm.
In one of my presentations, I found this UN video, and it's a training video for teachers to talk about, and it was in the Netherlands to talk about sex with a 3-year-old. So there was literally a teacher there with the 3-year-old in Dutch or whatever she's speaking, and you see the subtitles, and she's like, what do you do with your wiener? Do you touch yourself at the table? No, you don't touch yourself at the table, do you? That would be awful. And you can see this kid just like, and listen, I I did my degree in psychology. It's pretty basic 101 that when you tamper with children too young and you introduce sexual content too early, you actually change the functions of their brain.
Yes.
That's
Yes, I've seen
just
that research.
right.
Their physical brain development will change as well as their social and emotional development.
100%. And so the people at the top know this. Now, listen to this. So yesterday I posted about there's a man, a trans man in Canada who just got an award from our general governor, a merit award for shutting down, ready for this, a rape crisis center, the oldest rape crisis center in Vancouver. He got the funding cut because he complained so much and pushed that they would not accept transgender men into the facility where victims of women, raped women, are staying. They would not accept trans men. And he got their funding cut, and he just got a Medal of Diversity and Inclusion Award from our Governor General.
Like, what are we doing?
What are we doing? And there's still people, and I don't know if they're trolls or bots or what, that are on there posting how crazy it is for me, and just you wait till you have a niece or a nephew that says they're trans. And I'm like, if I had a niece or nephew that said they were trans, I would be putting them on a plane and getting them out of this country. And I don't know if you know about this, Elena. Do you know
Mhm.
about Bill C-11 up here in Canada?
No.
Let's talk about legislation for a second,
Yes, tell
because
me.
so Bill C-11 passed about a year and a half ago, and uniparty. Okay. So if you guys have your Democrats and your Republicans. So
It's a
this is for
uniparty
us.
also.
So
Yeah.
ours is too. And they came together. Not one person voted against this. So if your child identifies as trans, you have to automatically gender affirm them and go the pharmaceutical path. If you do not, you will end up in jail. I was actually on What is a Woman? The guy that he interviewed was a guy in BC up here that was in jail for like 67 days. And they gag order the courts, and you're not even allowed to talk about it in media or you'll be charged. So not only do you have to gender affirm, you cannot find them any help by a clergyman, a psychologist, a mental health professional to help your child get through this kind of anxious or confusing time. And you are not allowed to leave the country with your child. You will be put in jail and you'll be fined. That is what they pass through. And 4.5 minutes of them clapping like they did something so great, they'll see 11 because they are demonizing conversion therapy. And that's how they position it. But what they've done is they've completely taken away parental rights while they're doing all of this in the schools, shutting down parents at school boards, simultaneously passing legislation through the House. Like, it's insane,
I'm aghast. I
right?
mean, we have some similar things happening in California, that you can have your child taken away from you, and you can lose custody of your child either from another parent or from the state if you don't affirm the child. This takes that to the next level, but that will be the next step in California. I'm sure they're looking at Bill C-11 and trying to do the same thing. Yes, completely taking away parental rights, but completely ignoring the science that, we just found out last year, or in 22 actually now, that some of the puberty blockers they give kids are causing brain swelling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We know that they're causing osteoporosis. And at this point, it's almost common knowledge that, a drug like Lupron, which is the most common puberty blocker, not only, it was used to chemically castrate sex offenders. So here we had the American Civil Liberties Union. They fought against using it on sex offenders because it was cruel and unusual punishment, too extreme
Mm-hmm.
for child rapists, but we can give it to children. So what it does, it is sterilizing the kids. These are just a couple examples, and not even to mention the surgeries, and not to mention that we really don't have enough research to know that these things are safe. We already know they're not safe by the things I just said.
Mm-hmm.
And they're completely ignoring that science and not allowing parents to protect their children, and protecting parents who are abusing their children, because over 60% of these trans kids are autistic.
Mm-hmm.
So you have kids who can probably more easily than a non-autistic child be convinced, into feeling like, here's where you'll come and you will feel like you belong, and this is your community. Just take these drugs and you'll
Mm-hmm.
feel better.
Mm-hmm.
It's criminal. And it's tragic. Well, here we've had 19 states ban these things for minors, and they're calling it a trans genocide and all that, which is ironic because by sterilizing children, that's an actual, genocide of cutting off a family line so it will die off very quickly within one generation. That's genocide.
Yeah, it definitely goes hand in hand with their Depop agenda. And, I'm just going to say it that it's absolutely demonic because that's how I see it. Like, that's what we're watching. We're watching the biggest child sacrifice on a collective global level that we've ever seen come to rise in the public. And they're just wanting us to accept it. And you can see with when people get irate that you just don't accept their version of reality. You're not even trying to hurt them or, take them out or kill them or threaten them. Like, I've never done that to any human on the planet, but they don't even want you to not accept what they're saying. They want you to celebrate it. And if you do not celebrate it, they'll go after you. I mean, that's where we're at. That's when you know that there are some demonic forces that have landed on these people. And, it's like hell is empty. That's what it feels like. Hell is empty and
Yes.
everyone's up here. I don't know. I mean, it's It's nuts, right? Like, at what point? I mean, and you just think to yourself, like, all these politicians, all these people who have a voice aren't saying anything. Everyone's just going on like tickety boo, right? Like, I'm just gonna keep paying my
Well, they're
taxes.
all
Like,
bought, they're all, blackmailed.
yeah,
They all are making money on it.
yeah, it's a
They've
big,
all
big.
invested in the big pharma in all these drugs. And so for them, it's profitable and safe to not say anything.
Mhm.
And we no longer, I'm sure you feel this, sounds like you feel the same way in Canada. You no longer feel represented by your elected
Oh
officials. I
yeah,
know I don't.
no, 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 no. Absolutely not. I mean, it's funny because there'll be an upcoming election, just like with you guys, in 2025, supposedly, or they think Trudeau's going to get out, right? And Pierre Poilievre's going to save the day. I'm like, Pierre Poilievre is the one that denounced Christine Anderson, which is the MP from Germany who stood up against Trudeau, the only one in the EU, and the only one that's actually dealing and talking about the mass immigration that's going on in her country. But of course, she's labeled a racist for doing so. Meanwhile, women are getting raped right, left, and center in Germany in the middle of the
Yeah.
night and at train stations from these men, these men, these males that they're letting in, like just like they're doing at the border in your country. And no one's allowed to talk about it because you're a racist. You know what I'm saying? It's just like any those key words, you're on target. Racist, transphobe, bigot, climate denier, you're good. You're good. If you're in that
Yeah.
category, keep going.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yes. I'm a conspiracy theorist and a white supremacist.
Right.
Okay, go ahead. I'll take whatever you got. You call me. I don't
That's
even care.
right.
And that's where some of us are starting to win a little bit, is because they just, now their arrows just bounce right off.
Mhm. Mhm.
We
Yeah,
don't care anymore. Like, I'm coming, you're coming for the children, and I'm coming to stand between you and the children. And you
that's right.
can call me whatever you want.
That's right.
So here, just speaking of racism and the absurdity of our government. So we have a couple senators, Cory Booker and Barbara Lee, and they keep every couple of years putting this new bill up. It's called the Real Education for Healthy Youth Act, and it is to bring federal funding, to garner federal funding to have sex education starting in kindergarten, like formal sex education starting in elementary.
Mm.
And when you read the bill, it's like 40 pages of gobbledygook, but every other paragraph says that the reason we need to do this is to combat white supremacy,
Oh.
because marginalized communities haven't had proper sex education, and that's because of white supremacy. I mean, they
Wow.
just slap it all together in this ugly stew, and then they go out, and the people that vote for them don't read the bills that they put out.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
here we are, and this is how our tax dollars are being spent. And quite frankly, our children are in danger of something like that passed, and they start teaching even heavier sex education than they already are to our little ones in school formally. I mean, I think these kids are going to be so screwed up by the time they're in the third or fourth grade, because they're seeing themselves as sexual objects. They're seeing other kids as sexual objects. So they'll abuse each other. And even if a teacher isn't has no intention of ever touching a child, this kid's ready when the first adult that walks in the door that is a creep, that does want to touch them, because they're going to think this is normal and I'm not supposed to feel the way I'm feeling, and I just have to be quiet, because if I say anything that makes me bad, that means I hate.
Mhm.
You can't
100%.
speak out
But
against
love is
somebody
love.
hurting you.
Love is
Yeah.
love. And, then of course with the white supremacy notion and, apologizing for your whiteness, we have the critical race theory that's also embedded in the curriculums. And, that's just making white kids feel guilty for something they had no control over. And it's making further divide and making every other ethnicity feel that they have less agency. And up here in Canada, they're passing right now, it's gone through the second reading in our Senate and our House, Bill Education 67 of the Education Act. So they are literally changing get this, the definition of racism to a notion that means that one race is superior over another, not just consciously, but also subconsciously. They are literally changing the definition. And now they're putting in that bill that every teacher who goes to school and to become a teacher has to do all the diversity and equity training and has to be versed and has to sign off on that they too believe the notion that there is something called unconscious racism. So you see the setup, right? I mean, like
Hmm.
you said the younger generations are going to just be, they're getting rid of the old ones, right? They don't want the old ones that have common sense that are saying, I don't want to teach about dildos in my classroom. They're going to get rid of those ones real quick,
Yep.
give them the clot shot, get what they can to get them out of there. And then they're going to bring in this new breed, which we're already seeing these, head cases on TikTok that are like, can't wait to indoctrinate your kid.
Nothing about math or science or reading on their
No.
bulletin boards. Their whole classroom is a rainbow flag.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So you've got these ones that are, they have their own trauma and they're being empowered, right? By the top down. And a lot of the teachers I've interviewed actually talk about during COVID how that's when all the stuff came up, all the Soji stuff, all the rainbow stuff, when the parents were locked out of the schools. That's when it was happening. And that they've
Makes
broken the
sense.
triad. They've broken the triad, the original triad that between student, parent, and child. So any problem that there was a triad where they worked together, and that has been broken and severed with the parent. And now the parent has become an enemy. And with teachers, one thing I'll say, listen, there are some great teachers. I'm sure they start out great. They think they're doing a great thing. I get it. I went into social work and psychology and service work. But I didn't know what I was doing, and I was just doing what I was trained to do. I was teaching behavioral cognitive therapies to families who had children with disability to make them more compliant. Now I'm an unschooling coach. So, I'm doing the complete opposite, right? I'm doing the complete opposite. So same with teachers. Teachers are like asking a fish to explain, water. I mean, they've literally gone through the system themselves, then went through the system to learn how to teach within the system, to stay in the system and work in the system and work up a ladder. They have no idea. And the ones who do have left. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on. And that's why I advocate for unschooling or homeschooling or find your homeschooling pods, find your community. Let's make some solutions here because these people cannot be trusted at this time.
I think that would be the greatest way to make a huge jolt in change. Just everybody, or as many people as possible say, you know what? I don't need a second car.
Yeah.
I don't need the best cable package, because
Yeah.
that's the thing.
Let's get rid
Everybody's
of that.
gotten really fat and happy and spoiled.
Mhm.
And making personal sacrifices very hard for Americans. A lot of Americans, I can say that,
Mhm.
and so, but saying, I don't need those extra things. I don't need the extra bathroom and bedroom. We can live in a smaller house, and I'm going to put my family first and put my kids first. That will create such a lightning bolt in the public education school system, that
100%.
they will have to change because
Yeah.
their funding will disappear. I mean, look at, we have Randy Weingarten here in the US, the head of the biggest teachers union, and all she does is rail against homeschoolers. She goes after them so hard. And all the data shows that homeschool kids do better academically, on standardized tests, on college admissions, on social skills, all of it. And
Mm.
she is losing her mind because we are inching up towards more and more homeschool kids, and she's
Mhm.
losing funding. And it's fun to watch, but it needs to be bigger. And I think people, that's why I included a little bit about homeschooling in the, in the film, because I wanted to have just enough to let people know that, these myths and stigmas around homeschooling, they are simply not true.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, now it's like the stigmas are around schooled kids. And now that I've been doing it for 4 years, I'll even go further and say unschooled kids are even more sought after than homeschoolers in universities. Like if people go, not that I want my kids to go to university, because I clearly see that the higher up you go, the worse it is. So
Right.
all of that, by the time my kids are ready to go, I mean, I'm pushing for entrepreneurship or trade schools, like go learn an actual skill. Do not stay away from these woke universities and colleges, please. But honestly, like, yeah, I mean, I think we're at 5 million homeschoolers now in North America. It's jumped 120% in the last year up in here in Canada. So with the awareness, I mean, we are her nemesis. Like we are exposing and bringing light to the darkness of which has been there for a very long time. These institutions have gone unchecked. And so people like you and me are definitely threats to her, but thank God, because it really, like you said, it would take one generation, just like sterilizing them, one generation to like take out a family bloodline. And like, let's be honest, we got to start listening to what these elites say. We know there's a Depop agenda. Let's look into Planned Parenthood. You guys get off the Instagram and get onto some of these websites or presentations. Go see the work. Go see Elena's documentary. Like, you have to go further into just looking at memes to really understand, right? Like, this is happening, you know?
Yeah. And you know what? And so much of the stuff, like I said, I'm not an investigative journalist, but so much of this stuff is just, it's in with arm's reach. It's not that hard to find a lot of the information. I
Yeah.
mean, it's really easy to find it. You just got to want to spend a little time, like you said, and it's worth it because it's for your children. You wouldn't put your kid in a vat of poison for 8 hours a day, take him home, give him a bath and say, well, he's fine. And I don't have to worry. And that's how people, I hear one excuse I hear from people is, you know what? No, I know what they're telling him in school, but when he gets home, we tell him what's what.
Yeah. I
But
know.
so for
I
30
know.
seconds, when you say, no, that's not true, but he heard it all day long in school, you're not undoing it in 30 seconds.
Oh,
It
no.
sinks in.
That's right.
And, people really need to get a grip on exactly how important it is for their families and for this country in your country, or
Hmm.
in just
Hmm.
human society. I mean, we got other countries around the world that are looking at us and going, what are they doing? What is going on over there? Because they understand human nature and they're still respecting it.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I unfortunately, or fortunately, however it's supposed to roll out, is that people don't really do anything until it's affecting them personally. And I've gotten many a phone calls and emails saying, help me. My kid's identifying as trans. My 8-year-old says they're going to a non-binary birthday party. What do I do? I didn't realize this was in my school. So, you just kind of have to lead by example and be a soft landing for those who are ready to make that shift when they see it coming. But literally, our countries have been infiltrated by a globalist agenda that is under the umbrella of the sustainable goals, the UN sustainable goals. I mean, they want
Mhm.
to make homeschooling illegal. They have said under the guise of privilege. So think about that, all you 5 million homeschoolers out there. You might want to start piping up and leading by example as well to the rest of the community, because we're going to have to fight this together, you know?
Wow, I hadn't heard that they want to make homeschooling illegal.
Hmm.
Under the guise of protecting children and what's best for children.
Because we
Because
can't have any
parents,
privilege, right? You can't have any privilege. We need to have one world government, one world religion, one world school, you know,
right?
that
Most
that
It's funny because most homeschoolers that I personally know, they live extremely simple lives. There is no financial class privilege. They live in
oh,
smaller
I
homes.
most of
They
them are
give
down to one income. Yeah.
one income and not one, multi-million dollar income. And
Hmm.
so it's to call it privilege is laughable in
Yeah.
reality when what it really is sacrifice. So yes,
Yeah.
okay, a child having the privilege of being raised by parents who are willing to sacrifice for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a privilege. But so
But is
what?
it, is it, or is it a sovereign right given by God?
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, I birthed these children. And you know what? I think that we're the lucky ones. It's not a sacrifice. And that sounds like a cliche. There is a sacrifice. I understand the
I
financial
just mean
costs.
financial. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the spiritual cost and the emotional cost, because a lot of parents come to me and they want solutions, but they don't want to change anything in their life. And I tell them two things. Number one is everything's going to change anyway, so you might as well take the bull by the reins. Because I don't know if you've looked outside there, if you're under a rock yet, it's going to happen anyway. So you might as well get ahead of it. Um, and yeah, like just basically that. And they say, well, just tell me where to put my kid, tell me what to do. And I was like, what you do is you work on you work on this conditioned mind, because our kids actually will be all right if we get them out of that toxic soup. It's us that are mostly fucked up because we've been way conditioned more than our children. We have to
Correct.
unhook from the system. We have to start questioning the beliefs, this rat race that we're in, this timeline, these outside expectations, this jumping, this gold star reward system, this accomplishing things for just the sake of accomplishment. Like, what are we actually doing? If people understood where the standardized testing model actually started from. The guy who actually talked about it, Ingalls, back in like the 1920s. And you can get all of this information through John Taylor Gatto's work, and I'll put him in the show notes as well. You know, the elites got together with business and government in order to create public schooling. That's what happened. And they said, okay, we don't want a mobocracy. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to keep them dumb and keep them in a role of servitude. That's what we have to do. So that's
Yep.
what school is about. We have to make them reflexive, obedient followers, and we have to make sure that they don't find out this is happening to them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create these other schools for our kids who will run the slaves, right?
Yeah.
And intergenerationally, we'll pass on the keys to the human farm, and we'll teach them how to do that. And so that's what we're actually waking up to, right? That's what's actually happening.
It's absolutely, it's been happening ever since back then, ever since they
Mhm.
decided to do this. I mean, you know, we just in this, you know, I'm just giving you a concrete example. Just recently in the state of Illinois, they dropped funding for, you know, low income kids. There was funding by the state for low income kids to have school choice to go to private school, and they were paying the tuition from the taxes, and they just dropped it and left all these kids out in the lurch, and they all have to go to public school now. The governor, who did nothing, he just like was like, oh yeah, whatever, let it happen, didn't fight the legislature, didn't speak out, nothing. He went to Milton Academy, which is like one of the finest private boarding schools in Massachusetts and in the country. Like senators, presidents, like that's where they go. That's where their
Mhm.
kids go. So
Mhm.
that's where you went, and you just cut funding because, yeah, the little minions, they're not useful if they can think.
Right.
And so there's
That's
a
right.
concrete example right here in the state. Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, and I actually called him today about it. And
Interesting.
his secretary got a little, or one of the people in his office got a little testy with me. She's like, you know, the legislature did that. I said, well, I've been looking to see if he'd said anything about it, if he tried to fight for it, and I can't. So, you know, so I'm calling you. Can you help me? Can you help me? Did he? Did he stand up for the children?
Mm.
Oh, she was not happy. So yeah, I've been actually calling legislatures, excuse me, elected officials around the country, and posting the video of the phone call on TikTok and Instagram,
Instagram.
and I'm calling them out on a lot of this stuff.
I love it.
Not just education, also about racism, and you know, Michelle Wu in Boston with her no white people Christmas party and things like that, calling and giving them, you know, giving them a piece of my mind. And people are really loving it because nobody does it. Nobody's standing up.
100%.
Nobody's standing up for the average Joe.
Mhm.
You know,
100%.
not enough of us are. Not enough of us are. You are, I
Mhm.
am, and I could name, you know, I could name some others, but we need more of us, because if there are enough of us speaking up and spreading the truth and shining light in these dark places, they can't hide. They
That's
are
right.
demons. They do fight. They do, what's the word? Recoil from truth.
Mhm.
And they will back off
Mhm.
eventually once enough of us are awake.
Yeah, 100%. So what is your strategy now moving forward? You've made this documentary. Do you have like a team of people that have come to your aid and want to get on board, or are you still like the lonely wolf out there, crying?
It's a little lone wolf, but I find that a lot of people, once they hear about it, are saying, "Let me introduce you to so and so,"
Mm,
and oh, I know this other guy who's got a podcast that this is a good fit, and let me introduce you over there, and it's starting to grow that way.
awesome.
And you know, my Twitter community is growing, and a lot of those people are putting the word out there. And you know, I made this film entirely out of my own pocket. It was me and the editor. That was it.
Amazing.
So research, writing, booking hotel rooms, like all of it was on, you know, every last thing was on me. And he only did the editing, which I shouldn't say only, because it was an awful lot to make that film, and travel with me. But, you know, I didn't have any marketing budget after that. This is entirely word of mouth. This is a passion project to hit people over the head with the truth about the media lying to them, and then the history of what's going on, and how this came to be, and let them stop and start really looking at their teachers and librarians. And I hate to do that to teachers and librarians, but unfortunately that's, that's the first line of defense there, or the first line of, who's putting this in front of the kids. And it's happening, people are starting to see the film and they're starting to talk about it. And I'm getting a lot of great feedback like, oh my God, I had no idea it was this bad. I believed the media. I believed in the book ban stories. And now I'm looking at it differently. And that's just it. I just want to crack the, facade. So I'm out here going on podcasts like this. I'm reaching out to a few dozen people a day, as much as I can, with no budget, no team, So
Wow.
it's, yeah, I'm just out here fighting on my own, doing what I can.
You're being led by God, that's for sure.
I am.
I just feel like that's where the charge, that's where the energy comes from. So how can people support you? Where can they find you? What do you need right now? And what's the last message that you'd like to tell parents out there?
Okay, so they can watch the film first thing at americangroomerfilm.com. So just go there, click play. It's right there on the top. It's free to watch. There is a donate button if anybody wants to support my work, because I would love to be able to do more. Other than that, if you want to follow me on Instagram and Twitter and get in this conversation, it'll help you to stay informed. I'm at The Based Mother on both Instagram and Twitter. And those are the places. And, final word is, first things first, awareness is the first step that we need to take. We need to let more people know the truth about what's happening and the truth about what's in these books, that removing them from schools is not book banning, it's just removing materials that aren't appropriate for children. And then beyond that, once you help me spread the word, find people who are like-minded and step up and run for your local school board positions. Get out there, or at least start going to the school boards and putting them on the spot and asking them why this stuff is there. Here in the States, we've always been told that voting is the most important thing we can do. It is extremely important. And if you voted, you've done your civic duty. And I believed that for years. And yes, it is partially true. It is important that we vote, but that keeps us complacent. If we think that by voting, we've done something for our country, we are fools, and we've been asleep at the wheel, and we've just completely disengaged from the process that was meant and set up for us to be involved in. And look where it's gotten us. So we got to step up. You got to step up and fight for the kids.
Amen. And I'm the first to say that I was a fool. I was definitely asleep at the wheel. And I think we've been conditioned not to be interested in politics for a reason, especially up here in Canada. Boy, it is sleepy and we are complacent. And I was one of those. Just like wouldn't even imagine. Now I won't really go into it because I see that the entire system needs to fall and it's completely corrupt. But I
Same.
will lead a parallel society and create a new community outside of that system. And that's what, I've got to do. That's what we all have to do. And
I
anyway,
love that. I
just
just want to say, you leading a parallel society, people like you building, and me out here shouting and letting people know what's going on. And I know you're also doing that. It really inspires me. It does. This is awesome. Thank
and
you.
you inspire me to put together. I know how much this takes, and for you to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go, and I'm going to put this together on my own dime in my own time. And I know that's because we are being called, and some of us feel that we can't just sit by idly while we see this evil continue to disparage our communities. And so I appreciate you. I know my viewers will appreciate you, and I will have everything in the show notes. And I would love to have you on again, especially if you're going to do a sequel. Maybe you and I can do some work down the road, and I can have you in our unschooling community later on for a further interview.
I would love to. I would love to talk
Wonderful.
more. Yeah,
Okay.
maybe in person one day.
Yeah, that would be great. I might be
Even better.
fleeing. I might be fleeing from Canada and having to come down to one of your states. So
I'm in Florida, so far we still have freedom.
Yes, I know you do. Yeah, that would be the first place that I would go. All right, Elena, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.